Hey guys, it's Mathel here once again, and since it's been about a couple months, or probably roughly halfway through the league by now, it seems to be a decent enough time to look back on the league and kind of analyze what it did right, and possibly what it did wrong. So I wanted to talk a bit about the Legacy League, the one we're still currently playing, and then also go over a bunch of the old leagues since I've played, I think, pretty much all of them, and I can give a bit more info as to what happens in leagues, I'd say, as to where they fall short and maybe could have been better, which quite often seems to be the case amongst these leagues that have been played in the past, in that they just could have been made a lot better with a few little retroactive changes a few weeks into the leagues as we discover mechanics that are good and that aren't so good. So I will start off by talking about Legacy League, which has been a pretty fun league overall, I would say. If you haven't really touched too much of it, it's a combination of all the previous leagues by letting you pick up league stones and then put them into your little Legacy device, which allows you to change the zone to have three previous leagues active at once, and some of them have some pretty cool mods and all that sort of stuff, so it does get somewhat exciting about comboing the right types of things, and can be very lucrative and profitable. And it's been a pretty good league. It's fairly smooth for the most part for how it was implemented and how you use the system, but the biggest problem for me has been, if you're also someone that's leveled quite a few characters, you'll definitely have noticed that you get way more really cool league stones that are blue with multiple mods. So we're talking league stones that have, you know, both an affix and a suffix, and they're blue, and they have really sort of nifty, fun changes to go along with them. And you find these all the fuck over the place when you're leveling. Like, we're talking probably well over half of the league stones you find are magic. Then once you hit maps, all of that just dries up completely and you get nothing but white league stones non-stop. And a lot of the less cool ones as well. I don't know if the you know, drop rate of breach, for example, is lower, but you know, things like breach, for example, I feel like I see a lot less of than bullshit like an essence or a torment or whatever. So the biggest criticism I'm throwing out is that it really feels like the white league stones in maps seem to have a much higher chance to drop than the blue ones. So the blue ones are really quite cool, and some of them have really great mods. I don't think anything really needs to be improved there. Some are a lot better than others, but overall the blue, you know, good magic ones can be pretty fun and exciting to interact with, but they're very just rare at this stage. So without going out and buying them yourself, you're probably missing out on a lot of the cooler league mods while you're doing your maps. And if you don't have pretty cool league mods, and if you don't have your league stones active, then you're basically just playing standard, and it sometimes does feel a bit that way. So that's probably my only real criticism of the Legacy League and League Stone system, in that you just don't get enough really cool ones, especially not in maps. While you're leveling, you get plenty, and then they usually get a level restriction thrown on them, and I'm still finding myself quite often going back and doing these in a lower content, just because they are pretty fun, they're engaging, and they're worth running, even though it's well below your level of content at that point. So, you know, there's something to take away from that, I think. And if they alter the drops for the map ones to be similar to the rest of the game as you play it, then I think the league itself would be a lot more exciting and definitely a lot more playable for a longer time. So that's the opinion I hold over Legacy League, which is it's a pretty good league, but it could have had a few little twinks to make it much greater than it currently is. And that does seem to be a running theme with a lot of the old leagues, where they have a pretty damn nice core idea, but the execution fell flat just a little, and could have just, you know, used a little alteration throughout the league to be a lot better. But a lot of the time it was just fixed after the league was over, and, you know, that wasn't too impactful in the end because we missed out on the much cooler league mechanic throughout the actual league. So to start off with, I'll say Anarchy League. I'll go through all of them, but I do remember Anarchy League pretty distinctly. It was a very fun league because Rogue Exiles were like these little mini bosses that you'd never previously faced before, just roaming around maps every now and again. But I definitely remember that after the initial, oh my god, these guys are pretty cool and they're fun to face, after that initial reaction, a few weeks in, I was just like disappointed at how few exiles I saw. You know, you'd see like one every 4 maps or some shit. They were pretty rare, and you know, you'd only fight like one at a time. So you'd fight one, you wouldn't see one for a few maps, and it was pretty disappointing in that. So it was a fun league and I really liked it, but it could have upped the spawn rate. And of course in future, they did up spawn rates, and it's attached to boxes and maps and all sorts of stuff. So you see a lot more exiles than you ever used to, but back then it was one every, you know, however many years, and it just didn't feel as impactful because of that. Domination League was shrines, and they were pretty damn cool, but once again, sometimes you just wouldn't see very many. You'd have a map with 3 of them, and that was a really fun, cool map. There was lots of pack size, you'd get really cool shrine effects, and then you'd have maps with none, and it felt a bit shit in that regard. Ambush League was probably one of the most exciting leagues for us because, you know, back then, because it was a whole new sort of system with boxes that especially lets us solo players solo the game a lot better because of the cartographer boxes. So it was the first real time in my Path of Exile career that I could sustain maps alone at a higher level. So it was a really fun league, and there's not really too much bad to say about this one. Ambush was pretty good across the board. You saw plenty of boxes. They did nerf cartographers like halfway through the league because we were getting too many good maps, but it was still good enough to be a really good league. Rampage League was just where you built up, you know, kill streaks up to a maximum of 1,000, and for what it was, you know, it was executed just fine. It was just kind of not everyone's favorite because it didn't change too much in your game, because you're always going fast, you're always trying to go fast regardless, you're still trying to stack kill streaks, but most leagues that are really exciting to us as players are ones that reward you in some way, and this just rewarded you with slightly faster clear speed for the most part, which didn't really change the way you played the game too much. It didn't really give you too many rewards in that sense. And it was kind of bland at the end of the day. Only a few of the kill streak rewards, you got like, you know, 1 at 50, 100, whatever. Only a few of those really felt any good, like one where stunned everyone, one that exploded everything around you, but a lot of them just barely did anything, and they were kind of lackluster and useless. If maybe they said after 500 kill streaks, you know, you dropped 5 currency items, which had a good chance of being at least 1 Chaos Orb, let's just say, maybe you would have gone out of your way to run maps that strictly went into Rampage format so you could stack those kill streaks. But otherwise, it was, you know, you really didn't have to participate, and there really wasn't much reward for participating. Torment League, as a lot of people will remember and know, is probably one of the least favorite leagues of a lot of players, because it was just implemented pretty badly, I guess. The ghosts were kind of a cool idea, you know, they inhabit a monster and then it gets buffed and drops extra loot, but the initial wave of Torment Ghosts just did not interact at all very well with the rare monsters. They'd usually hide in corners over to walls, they'd stand like hover right over the top of a rare and then just fuck off. They didn't really want to go to rares all that much. So it did get changed a few weeks in, I believe, to be more AI friendly, but they still weren't very good, and also they weren't very common. I remember you'd do maps and they weren't too common, and you really wouldn't get much of an impact from the league to your game. But the AI still really wasn't fixed until basically after the league was over. I remember after the league was over, Torment in random maps and all that actually worked out pretty well and was kind of, you know, good. But throughout the entire league of like 3 or 4 months, it just kind of was bad and didn't impact you at all. Warbands League, a lot of people didn't really like this one too much. I'm not sure why, because I thought it was a pretty cool league. My gripe with it, as with most other leagues, is that there wasn't enough of them. So you could run 3 or 4 maps and get no warbands, but when you did find warbands, and especially ones where there were several packs and the bosses and all that, it was a pretty cool league, I thought. It's a few extra little fights you could go against, and little interactions, and extra loot too. So warbands I thought was pretty cool, but yeah, it definitely lacked in spawn rate in maps, as many other, you know, leagues suffered as well. So warbands, I think if it was upped on spawn rate, could have been one of my favorites, but it was a bit like playing standard at a lot of times when you'd enter maps and have no warbands. Plus, you had to go to a website to check warband spawn rates in certain maps as they were traveling around maps and all that. So that was a bit tedious too. Talisman League, well, I don't know what to say about that. We had just so many. I guess we could look at this. We had so much clusterfuck of bullshit, you know, so many blue talismans, so many white talismans, I believe. That was a large part of the problem. It's hard to really pinpoint where this league went wrong because there's so goddamn much, in my opinion. White talismans were terrible and blue talismans were terrible. There were so many goddamn talismans. You needed, you know, huge amounts of space for it. There was the rewards for like stacking these talismans and then getting the next tier usually was just nothing or terrible. Rigvold's rewards weren't particularly enticing either. I don't know, there was just a lot going wrong with this one and not much has changed. This is pretty much still what it is. I think in this league we didn't get white talismans, at least it was baseline blue, but even then, you know, most of these blues just suck and do nothing but take up space, and then you finally get into a rare and get it upgraded and it sucks and takes up space. It kind of has to be this way if there's thousands of people playing. You know, if you had a better chance of getting a good rare, we'd see huge amounts of really good talismans up for sale. But right now the chances that you specifically get a good talisman are terrible, and it's not really anything to look forward to. Perandus League probably has to be one of the most popular and well-loved leagues of recent memory because it was quite a lot of fun to interact with the monsters. They looked pretty cool. The coin system was kind of cool, and Kadira gave you access to a whole bunch of uniques that you may have never had access to before because you didn't play those leagues or because they were way too expensive for you to obtain prior to coin system. So it was a very, you know, loot-based league where everyone had pretty much everything they wanted, and you can try and play with a lot of different builds. Biggest problem was performance issues, and there wasn't really much to change for this league except for altering performance issues as it went along because people had potato computers and couldn't really handle playing it. But this one didn't really need too many changes and it was fine as is. Prophecy League, Jesus, I'm not even sure what to say about Prophecy League. It was fun at the time, I guess. There's way too many dumpster prophecies that make you backtrack, or made you backtrack, and I guess that was kind of changed a bit, especially for this League Stone method, but a lot of them are pretty unimpactful and make you go out of your way to do stuff you don't want to do, and the entire storyline system of the 4 different storylines, I really didn't get behind that, so it wasn't a huge league for me, and even now it's not my favorite league. I don't know what you'd change about it, but just probably personal preference for me that it wasn't that interesting interacting with some of the prophecies. Essence League wasn't too bad from memory. It did have a few problems though, probably similar to the whole talisman method. You'd get quite a few dumpster essences in endgame maps, ones that didn't really help you progress too much, and you know, you'd have to stack countless amounts of essences to be able to get to those end game essences. So they spawned, I think, at a decent rate in maps, but just not the highest quality of them. So they'd be on the lower tier rather than the higher tier, and I think that got changed throughout the league, so it did get better. And as well as that, it just took up way too much space. There were way too many of them, and it was, yeah, pretty, you know, stash impacting. I think that was a big deal for this league too. Otherwise, it's a pretty good league, I'd say, for what it was. It was very crafting intensive for that league, and it did promote you wanting to make your own items. So the whole concept is pretty damn good, I think. And there wasn't too much to change as the league went on, but they did as they had to. And then we come to Breach League, which is, you know, the league before the one we're currently playing, which, in my opinion, probably the best league. There really wasn't much to change retroactively throughout the league. I don't think it was pretty good. There was a lot of breaches going around. They'd be really fun to, you know, interact with. The end game boss system for the breaches, where you get the breach stones and fight one of 5 extra bosses. Pretty cool stuff. The only complaint would be that Chayula was maybe a bit too rare. For a lot of people, I guess. I saw enough of them, I suppose, but a lot of people barely saw any. It took me about 2 weeks to collect my first Chayula Breach Stone, and I guess that's fair enough, given how, you know, decent the rewards are, but it could have been just a little bit more common because I play a fair bit in 2 weeks just to see the boss that could potentially drop nothing, which maybe is another gripe. Chiula had a decent chance of dropping nothing. I think my first 2 or 3 dropped absolutely nothing, and at that point the breachstones were 3 or 4 exalts each. So a few little tidbits to fix there, but overall it's still a really good league that didn't need many changes. In any case, you can maybe kind of see a theme going along here, that there's a few little changes you could make throughout a league that could have made the league a lot better, but ultimately the leagues are all about, plentiful stuff, more. So the more the merrier, more exiles, more shrines, more strong boxes, more warbands. Where it falls short is whenever you feel like you're playing standard because there's not enough of the league. That's my opinion on all the leagues. I think Legacy has potential to be pretty good. It's just, we could use some blue, magic league stones dropping a lot more in maps, because then you'd have a whole lot more fun running your maps and wanting to run all kinds of different league stones. That's my opinion on that, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Maybe you have some differing opinions. Feel free to converse in the YouTube comments. I will potentially jump in with a few of them, but I've already given my part. So thanks for watching, guys, and see you next time.